Welcome back to the Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you are currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps along your journey. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now, let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Now let's take you into the room at a previous Thermostat Cultures live event and my interview with former president of Starbucks, friend and mentor, Howard Behar.
All right, welcome back. Admittedly, I'm the guy who still walks into Starbucks and still walks up and looks at them and says, "Give me a black cup of coffee." Large. And they look at it and they're like, "No, you want grande or whatever?" I say, yeah, that one. And I say, "But give me a black cup of coffee." And they look at me like, "No, but what do you want?" I said, I want a black cup of coffee. That's fine. I'm whatever. And the reason why, of course, is because they want you to come in and they want you to participate in the creation of your own cup of coffee, right? And so they want you to come in and say, no, give me a double soy latte with fertilizer or whatever it is that you put in your garden, just whatever it is that you want to cultivate. They want you to participate. And as I have learned more about Starbucks and the amazing beginning of Starbucks, and that very early on, and in fact, one of the books that Howard wrote is called "It's Not About the Coffee," is they got really clear that they were going to have world-class coffee, and they put a whole lot of time and effort and energy and research and all that to create amazing coffee. They knew they had to have that. But truly, at the end of the day, it wasn't about the coffee. They got really clear on, what was it that we were going to honor, and what is the culture that we were trying to create. And from the minute somebody would step foot on their property, from the way that it was clean, to you open the door, to the music they played in the background, to the way they arranged the seats so that you could have the greatest conversation of your life, to the little messages they put on the cup, to the way the barista would welcome you and say, "What may I get started for you?" That it was all about bringing people into an experience that was greater than just that cup of coffee. I am so honored and excited to share and have Howard with us today because, Howard Behar, who I'm going to bring up here in just a second, began working at Starbucks when nobody knew anything about Starbucks. That they had a handful of stores out in Seattle and nobody outside of Seattle knew anything about Starbucks. And then he and his team led them to 15,000 stores around the globe and growing and growing and growing. And so the success and all of the accolades and everything that you would imagine comes with that, he has had. But that's not why he's here either. He's here because he's an amazing person. And I have been lucky to get to know him, and now he's become a friend and a mentor and somebody that I don't even know how it happened, but it happened. And has been somebody to come in my life. And so we are lucky to have him here to share about his experience of not just what happened at Starbucks, but what was it that they were trying to honor so they could cultivate? And what was it that they were looking at? Where we look is where we go. So what were they trying to give their eyes and their focus and their attention and their hearts to? And what were some of those intentional things they did to create an experience and a culture that took over the world, right? Would you help me welcome my great friend, Howard Behar?
I hate that stuff. I do.
Let's put you together, buddy.
I'm 73. I don't know anything about that. I don't know
anything about it. I always hate that. I want Howard Behar, human being. You know, that's the introduction I want. It's amazing how hard it is to get. You know, but that's what I see myself, because I was Howard before I went to Starbucks, and I was Howard after I retired from Starbucks, and I'm still Howard. And that's all I ever want to be, you know. So thanks for the introduction, but don't do it again.
Thanks for being here, buddy.
Thanks. It's amazing.
You, from the minute I met you and the way you would describe yourself, when we talk about authentic leadership and we talk about you saying, I just want to be Howard, because that is you. But the way that you've described yourself from the very beginning, the first days I met you, is you said, I'm a leader who I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and who I am is what you're going to get. How would you describe yourself?
Yeah, I'm that way. I don't know how to be any other way. I tried when I was young. I was working for a small public company, and it was the first time I ever got a promotion. You're looking at a guy that barely got out of high school and had a couple of years of community college, and I was really good at beer, and I got really good at single malt scotch. David, I know you're drinking that Jack Daniels crap. I don't know, but whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so I was working for this company, and first time I ever got a really big promotion, you know, to a vice president's job, and I was 26 years old. And I never expected it. It came out of the blue. And one day I was standing at the elevator, and the CEO of the company came up, or chairman of the company, a guy named Walker Treese, and he said to me, Howard, I just want to extend my congratulations. I know I'm not the first, but a well-deserved promotion. But there's something I'd like to talk to you about. Well, as soon as he said that little three-letter word, but, you know, my ears popped up, because God's talking to you. This is when you're 20, this is in the 70s. So, you know, this is when employees were to be seen and not heard. And so he was talking to me, he said, Howard, I know you want to be a great executive, and one of the things I've noticed about you is you always wear your heart on your sleeve. And he said, great executives don't show emotion. You know, they just keep it in themselves, and they show lots of maturity and how, you know, sharp and, you know, how good they are. And so the other thing I've noticed about you is you're always willing to express your opinion about things in meetings. And again, you know, you want to be known as a person of thought. And so you don't want to express your opinion right away. You know, you say something like, let me think about it for a day and I'll get back to you. You know, showing that you're really a thoughtful person. Well, as he's talking, I'm thinking, why did they promote me? I thought they knew who I was. So I won't go into the whole story, but I went through a few-month period of trying to change myself. Little tricks tried with myself, all sorts of things. And I just couldn't get there. And by the end of the 2 months, I went from a guy that loved his job to a guy that hated his job. And I literally got depressed over it. And I didn't know what to do. And finally, I decided I wanted to quit. And so I went in, I typed up a letter of resignation. The next day I went in, and I'd never told anybody in the company about that interaction with Walker because I was too embarrassed. I'd only shared it with my wife. And so I walked in at 6 o'clock that morning, first time I'd been early in a while because I was trying to avoid work. And one of my co-vice presidents said, hey, Howard, you got time for a cup of coffee? And I said, sure, I got time for anything. I'm going to quit today, you know. and we sat down, and he looked at me, and he said, Howard, what the hell is wrong with you? The guy that we all supported to be the next vice president of the company, you're not that guy anymore. Some of us are thinking you're all in it for yourself now. And so I shared the conversation that I had with Walker, and he looked at me and said, oh, he started to laugh at me, you know, which made me mad. And then he said, Walker didn't mean that. He was just, you know, talking. I said, baloney, I was there. I heard what he said, and I can't live like that. It's not who I am. And so I'm going to resign today. He said, no, you're not. And he said, we're going to go talk to Walker. And so we did, and Walker and I made peace. The truth of the matter is Walker meant everything that he said. It wasn't that he was a bad human being. He wasn't. He just was, he was 30 years older than I was. He was raised in a different generation, raised with an autocratic father, you know, and that's how he thought about life. And so we made peace, and I ended up staying but for a year after that. But finally I left. Too much water under the bridge, you know. But I decided during that year that I was going to figure out, because I didn't know how to answer Walker. It wasn't like Walker was asking me to change the color of my slacks or my shoes. You know, he was asking me to change who I was, and I didn't know who Howard was. I was just Howard being Howie, right? Smile on my face, living my life, enjoying my work. I'd never once thought about what my values were, what my mission in life was. I never thought about any of those things. And so I went to work on it, and I got this book, and it had a bunch of things in it. And so I created my values out of about 300 words. And then I created a mission statement, and I created a few words that really, what I call my 6 Ps, which drive how I live my life. And then I created a 5-year plan. Never had a plan. If you don't know where you're going, like you say, any path will get you there. And from that time forward, my life has been directed towards it. And so when anybody came up to me and said, there's something, I think you need to change, I could have a conversation. Because I could ask a question, well, what do you mean? And here are my values, and how are those in conflict with what you're talking about? And it changed my life. And for 40 years, over 40 years, for 45 years, I've carried around this statement. Howard, I call it Howard, a picture of Howard in 50 words or less, or my hat. It's the hat that I put on every morning when I get up. When I look across the bed and I look at my wife, I can put on my hat. When I go to work, I can put it, it's not, I don't have to wear a Starbucks hat, I wear my hat. When I go to visit my family, I wear my hat. And that hat is good enough. And that's how I've tried to live my life. It doesn't mean that I don't take input and I don't change when things need to be changed. And there's lots of things I've had to change in my life, or be aware of things that I wasn't aware of before. And so, that's what's driven me, and that's why I say I'm Howard.
Yeah, but what I know of you and what I just heard you say is that there was a time where you didn't have that clarity about what it is that you were.
I did not at all.
And so you showed up to this point where people were saying these things of you, or asked, we want you to change, we want you to do this, and you were going up and down like
it was painful. It was really painful. I can remember it to this day how painful it was for me. I mean, I was in tears every night going home. And just didn't know what to do to change myself, because I just couldn't get there. And then when I finally started to work on myself and figure out what really mattered to me, and it took a long time. It wasn't like in 1 week I became Howard. I didn't. I had to practice. I had to fake it till I made it. I had to internalize everything and keep internalizing. Is this really what I mean? Is this really what I mean? Is this how I want to be? And then there were many times when other people would push back on it. And I had to learn to stand up for myself and say, wait a minute, that's not okay with me. And it cost me. Many times I paid a price. I paid a price for it. But I decided the price was worth paying. And I was fired over a couple of jobs because of it. I got fired at 60 years old. I'm 73. When I was 65, I was on the board of the Gap, right? And I was on the board of the Gap for 8 years. And I had a disagreement with Don Fisher, who was the founder of the Gap, about something. He thought that money mattered, that money should be the driving force, and how everybody, that should be the reward for everybody. And I said, that can't be what drives people at the Gap. There has to be a soul here, that they're here for a reason bigger than their paycheck. Otherwise, we've got nothing. And he got so mad at me, he asked me to leave the board because of it. But that was okay, because I knew who I was, and it hurt. It hurt. At 65 to get fired, it's not great. But it took me a while to get over it, but I realized that's the price sometimes you got to pay, and I was willing to pay it. But
so we were just talking about what is honored will be cultivated.
Yeah.
And where you look is where you go.
Yeah.
And I know that you went through that process for yourself to say, well, what is it that I want to honor? And what are those values that are going to steer you individually? And then I know, which we'll talk about in a second, but how that began to play out with, very intentionally, what were the values at Starbucks that you were proactively trying to build? You and I, we've talked about that. How is culture shaped? And it's the 6 A's. I talk about the 6 A's of leading change. The first, you have to assess. So you got to even know where the heck am I?
Yeah.
And then you've got to align yourself around, well, who am I and what is it that I'm wanting to do, and who are the people around me? But then you got to be able to aspire and say, well, what do I want to be different? And then you got to be able to articulate, well, what are those values? And then you got to act. You got to actually put it into action, and then you got to anchor it, right? And so you started to get clear on, well, how do I tell that story of what it is that I value? So tell them about your values.
Okay, so before I went to work at Starbucks, I was trying to I had been president of a land development company that got in trouble and we had to sell it. So I'm 44 years old and I was trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life? I had kids getting ready to go to college and my wife was working. She was the only support. And so what was I going to do? And so I decided I'm going back to my roots. I'm going to buy a small business. And so in that journey, I'd actually go into Starbucks. And at that time, there was very few stores, maybe 20 stores, 15 stores. And they only had little 4-bar stools. And I'd get a cup of coffee and I'd sit and I'd make notes to myself. And I'd written on a piece of paper all the things that mattered to me and what kind of organization I wanted to lead or be part of. And I'd had all these things that I'd written down. And so when I started, looking around, I got introduced to this young guy named Howard Schultz, who was about 10 years younger than I was. And we met the first time, and he was looking for a VP of operations. And he had a long list of things that he wanted. The first thing, college degree. Second thing, he wanted food service experience. We got down to item number 10, can you breathe? That was the only thing that I qualified for. So we parted company, and about a year later, I still hadn't put together a deal to buy a company. And just by accident, I met up with Howard again, and through some of his people, and we got together, and he said, well, I still haven't found anybody. Are you still interested? And so I said, can I work for a week at Starbucks before you hire me? I'll work for free. I want to work and I worked in the plant for 2 days. I worked in the trucks for 2 days, and I worked in the stores for 3 days, just so I could feel, is this real? And I came out of that week saying, this is my place. This fits me. It was a social business. I loved coffee, and so, but I brought with me this list of things that mattered. And there were a whole bunch of things. One of them was that everybody got to vote. And I've since changed that to the person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom. But so my very first day on the job, I was out in the stores, and I would keep going out in the stores. And I called a meeting with all the store managers, and there were 2 district managers. And I asked I asked 2 questions. What do you like about Starbucks? What would you change about Starbucks? And I still have those notes to this day. And it was amazing how difficult it was for people to speak up. I had to beg them. I said, you can trust me. I will not burn you. Tell me. And there was only a couple of people that were willing to share. And finally it came out, not like this group, where everybody's talking really, there's a lot of trust in this room. And finally, and there were a couple people that just wouldn't speak up. I'll never forget the guy's name. His name was Peter Gunby. And he was a store manager. After the meeting, he said, well, if I would have known that you really meant what you said, to speak up, right? And I said, Peter, you can always depend that whatever I say, I will mean. And that's how we started. And I still have all those notes to this day of the things they liked, the things they wanted to change. And that's what drove the business. I just started working on the things. It wasn't my ideas. None of it was mine. It was all theirs. And we just started working on it. And my drive, I had a sign behind me that was behind my desk, and it was up on the wall. And it was basically the gist of it is that it's people will ultimately will create success or failure at Starbucks. It's not going to be the coffee. It's what you do. And that's what I drove at Starbucks. It's what I believed right from the very beginning. And it was not easy. It was not easy because they thought it was the coffee. They thought it was the ice cream. The ice cream's got to be good. The coffee's got to be good. That's your ticket to play. It's the people that make the difference. And that's what's driven Starbucks from the very beginning. And, Howard and I used to get in these blowouts because Howard was so focused on the coffee, and Howard he was raised differently. I was the third born in a family. I was the baby. I could do no wrong. My dad was 50 when I was born. It was a problem with that. There was an issue, but for a different reason. But Howard was raised in a family he could do no right. And that's how he came at everything. And so he was always externally focused. If something was wrong, it was always somebody. With me, if something was wrong, it was me. I had missed something. And that's where our battles were, until I finally convinced him it's not what it is, and we still argued over it even till the very end about those things. And I used to always say, Howard, what business are we in? God, do you want to make him mad? Ask him that question. Right? And if he wanted to put you down, he'd always say, well, you're just not a coffee guy. Right? One day he said that, and there was about 20 people around the table, and this was early on, and it just pissed me off, right? Because I'd watched him do it. I got up out of my chair, and I walked over to him, and I said, don't you ever effing say that to me again. You should have seen everybody back away from the table at that time. But it was that deal, because I knew who I was at that point in time. I was not after a job. I didn't care about a job. He was not going to be my CEO. He might have been the CEO of the company, but I wanted to be a partner. And that meant in all senses of the word, right? That I owned it as much as he did. And he's a great guy, and he's a giving guy. But we did those battles around the people stuff. But people is what drove Starbucks. And to this day, that's what drives the business. And every time we screwed up, every time we got in trouble, when we messed up, it was because we forgot that. We took our eye off the people ball. And it's like you're saying, because we stopped looking at that. And we started looking at how many stores we were going to build. We started looking at, how many states we were going to be in, how much money we were going to make. And every time we did that, we got in trouble. And every time we came back to it's about the people, everything went again.
Because we have an effing problem.
Yeah, because we have an effing problem.
We forget.
Yeah, we forget.
We forget the way that we're going.
It's human to forget.
And the way that culture gets shaped one of the ways culture gets shaped is that language helps drive behavior.
Language is everything in culture. The words you use matter.
Yeah.
And you got to be thoughtful about the words you use. Sometimes people will call bullshit on you. Like, we use the name partner for everybody that works in the company. And there was, newspaper article, well, partner, it's just a fancy word for employees. But for us, it was not. What it meant to us is there were no company cars, there were no fees for accounting fees for executives. There were no everybody got the same benefits.
No boats, no jets.
No jets until later. Yeah. After I left the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we were all in it together, and you could walk down the hallway, look at anybody in the face. Did I make more money than the barista? Yes. Did I get more stock? But it was all based on the compensation that I got. But everybody was in it together. Everybody had health care. I had the same exact health care as a barista had. No different. And so we wanted to walk down the hallway, look at everybody in the face, and we say we're in it together. And that's what partner meant. And that's what drove it. And that's what's kept it together all these years.
And so the language, again, to bring it personally for you, that you got clear on what the language was around and it's not about having the poster on the wall.
No, posters are death.
Right. Because the question is, as we've talked about before, the posters have got to be in the people. And so you have the poster because you want to be able to communicate the language, but the buy-in of whether that's just a poster or whether that's a tool for how it is that you're trying to move is what takes a culture from just being that's what we say we are, but that's not what we do. And yet for you personally, you got clear on what your values were for you personally as a leader. Right. And then I know this because walking into your place in Seattle, walking into your bedroom and seeing that right on their wall hanging is a statement of purpose for he and his wife Lynn, and language about their marriage. Of what is the purpose of why
we're together,
why we got married,
and why we stay together, and what we do together, and what we're committed to with each other. And I look at it every single day. It's right next to my ketubah, which is a Jewish marriage license, and they sit right next to each other, and they remind us of why we got together. And it drives our marriage, and it's so relevant today. We wrote the first draft in 1979, and we updated it in 1984.
Yeah, and so it's not carved in stone.
No, it's not meant to be. And we changed it again when we had grandchildren.
So talk about how your own personal values, and then so at Starbucks, the proactive process how did the values begin to become more than just a poster on the wall?
Well, number one, you don't use posters, right? Posters, they kill companies, right? See, people have to internalize things. It has to be theirs. I might use X word. I might say love, and somebody might internalize that a little bit differently. They don't have to internalize it exactly the same way I would, but they have to understand the meaning of it. They have to understand the meaning of it. But so look, cultures are directly reflective of the values of leadership, period. They can't be any different. I don't care what you say, it's what you do that matters. Right? You could say, if you say, I love you, or well, here's the one. People are our greatest asset. Right? Whenever I hear that, a red sign goes up on my head. You don't understand then, because people are not assets. Right? Assets are trucks, they're computers, they're things you own. You don't own people. We don't own anybody. And assets always give you what you expect. If you put oil in the truck, you put gas in the fuel tank, you turn the key, it starts up. Right? People never give you what you expect. They're human. We're here. And you got to be okay with that. And that's what we try to be with Starbucks. As a matter of fact, that's what you get in Starbucks. Or what we want you to get. We want you to get the human side of Starbucks and that barista. You know those words you said, what can we get started for you? That was not a saying that came from leadership. It got its own, I don't even know how it got there. But people, no matter where you go, what can I get started for you? I don't know how that started, but it just did. It became their language. And that's what drives it. And the culture of Starbucks is reflective of leadership's values and what matters, what we focus on, what our eyes are focused on, and what gets rewarded and what gets penalized, right? Because there always are those things. And you could miss your numbers 3 years in a row at Starbucks and I'd get fired. But you mess with the people, you're going to have a coaching session pretty quickly if we find out. And it doesn't make any difference what level you're at. You're the executive vice president, you mess with the people, right? Something's going to happen because the people are going to stand up, and we let that be. That to happen. A lot of executives that we recruited that came into our organization couldn't deal with that. They left. They said, well, what do you mean I'm going to be evaluated like that? I can't be evaluated like that. And they either left on their own accord or we helped them out the door. Because they had to be comfortable with the fact that their people were going to evaluate who they were and how they acted and how they treated them. And there was no other way. And that still is true today. Still is true today. It's the quickest way to get out of that door at Starbucks. And sometimes they lasted for a while. They didn't get caught early, but eventually they did. And people always knew it would happen.
So I'll take Howard Behar over Dean Smith any day, by the way, just for the record. But when you walk into your office,
yeah,
which again, I know that you have won plenty of awards. You've been recognized around the globe for what you did at Starbucks and beyond. And yet you walk into his office, and instead of seeing all over his walls plaques and newspaper articles and what Forbes and Fortune and Inc. and all these places said about him, you see all these different picture frames of people. Of people when you opened your store in some place around the world, of gathering with the people that did that. You see the people, these teams of people that for you, it's clear when you walk into the room that where you look was this, and I know you talk about it, but this idea of servant leadership.
Right.
And that was the mindset that which you brought to the business.
Well, you all everybody in this room, I bet, is familiar with servant leadership at some level. But, the idea of servant leadership is that leaders are there to serve, not be served. And that doesn't, and it means in the context, so leaders are there to serve their people in the journey of their people accomplishing their own goals while their people contribute to the goals of the organization. And it's that old two-way street. Without both working together, nothing works. And, I always thought that...
Into the event.
They ask, how can you make money treating people well? I say, how can you not? Right? Look, performance comes from doing the right things right. And primarily the right things are working and growing your people. And they'll figure it out. We all had goals. We had performance. Starbucks is a high-performance company. I mean, we produce results. We're in 75 countries, 27,000 stores. Something had to be done right there. But at the end of the day, performance comes from how we treat the people. There's no other way. You cannot push down, you can't have the performance button in your company or your organization and push that thing down and keep pushing it down and pushing it down to get performance. It doesn't work. What you do is love your people, understand that the person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom. That means that they know more than you do about what it takes to have a clean floor. Or the head of IT knows more about computers than you'll ever know. The barista knows more about what those human beings we call customers want than we will ever know. And so we give them the freedom to make those decisions and to do the things they need to do or to give us input. Now, I'm not pleading for anarchy here. It's not my point, right? That you can't have 5,000 flavors of ice cream. Your plant couldn't produce it. Right? So you narrow down and you learn from each other and you narrow it down, say this is what we're going to do. Now if anybody has a better idea, let me know. And so that's what we try to do. But yeah, performance matters. Performance matters in our relationships. Does performance matter in your relationship? Right? If he doesn't take out the garbage, do you yell? Hey, garbage! When my wife yells Howard, she says, Howard! I know what it means. Garbage. But performance matters. And performance matters everywhere. And we got to get comfortable with that. And our people understand, everybody understood that performance matters. But at the end of the day, the most important performance was how we treated each other, number one. How we treat each other in the organization. And that automatically transposed itself to how we treated those human beings we serve, we call customers. I hate the word customer, right? Because when you say customer, it says they got $1 painted to their forehead and glued to their forehead. And if you just say something, the right thing to them, you'll get that $1. The goal should be treat them as a human being, and if they want to spend $1 with you, they will, and if they don't, that's okay too. And that's what we try to do. I used to tell our people that they were social workers, and they had 10 seconds to determine where that human being was in front of them. Did they just get a ticket? They'd just get a traffic ticket and it was going to cost them their week's food bill? Or did their kid just get a full ride to, what's that university here, Ohio something? Okay. And you're excited about it even though they could have probably gone to a better school. No. Okay. And the kid just got a full ride to Ohio State and you can hardly wait to tell somebody? And that means that you got to listen with those little antennae that we all have and be in tune with it. And respond accordingly, and that's what makes it work. And that's what made it work. But performance comes from that. You can't push down the performance button and expect performance. You push down the people buttons always first. That's what it is. And that's what makes it work.
I'm interested in what your questions are from this group of people to be able to ask whatever it is that you want, whether it's about Starbucks, whether it's about Howard, whether it's anything about leadership or culture in the world today. What do you think? What are your questions? Christy, right behind you there.
I just had a comment, Howard. I think your model takes into account the whole idea that your employees have a tremendous amount of discretionary time that a lot of companies don't count when they're talking about performance. And I wondered if Starbucks had any conversations about capturing that or recording it or noticing it or rewarding it when employees used their discretionary power, their time, their skills, in what ways to better the company?
All the time. All the time. Most of it, there are formal processes for it, but I've never found those work very well. I'll tell you what I found works is when I used to visit stores, I was in the stores every day. Even no matter, I used to think my day job was the people, my night job was the business. And so that meant you had to listen. So the same two questions I asked at the beginning, and everybody that reported to me had to ask those two questions. First of all, they had to meet people, and they'd ask, okay, how long have you been here? Where did you come from? What do you like? What don't you like? What would you change? And that's what drove it. And if you do that often enough, things start to tie together. We had the suggestion boxes, we had the forms that you'd send in. It never worked as well as the conversation, to tell you the truth. And you had to bring that back. Whenever our people would go out, every Monday we had a staff meeting. We'd go around the table and we'd read customer comment cards, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And sometimes it was tough to listen to those things. And then we'd read, people had been out, they'd say what they experienced, who they talked to, what they brought back. And then we had this, what we call mission review. It was a card that anybody who worked in the company could write in and say, we think this is in conflict with our mission, or this supports our mission, we need to do more. And we'd read those cards too. And so we were constantly having that dialogue and that conversation. That's what it took to really make it real. But yeah, absolutely, you have to have that.
Yeah, Craig.
In such a large organization that's spread out like Starbucks, I mean, how does an organization ensure that those values are at every single location? I mean, how do you make sure that that happens? I mean, what's the process that Starbucks went through in order to make consistency across all of its stores from a cultural perspective?
Well, like you get what you look at, the constant conversation was about people. I mean, that was the conversation everywhere. It still is today. You still hear it all the time. But we weren't perfect. It wasn't happening all the time. It just doesn't. It's a human, it's human journeys. Somebody gets up on the wrong side of bed, a manager comes in, they're grouchy, they yell it for nothing, those things happen every day. And when you've got 27,000 stores across 75 countries, But number one, you have to trust that it will. And then you have to expect it. That's what we expected. And you get what you expect, and you inspect it too, but you can't police it. You can do some of that, right? But at the end of the day, we used to have, like every organization we had mystery shoppers, which I would never let them use that word. I said, we called it snapshot. Because I always felt that at any one time, I have a good side and I have a bad side. If you take the wrong side of me, I don't look so good, And that can happen. You could take a snapshot. That doesn't mean the store manager was bad or the people was bad. It was just a point in time. And we always did that with a velvet glove. And because if you do it with a hammer, then you get things you don't want. But you have to expect that. And I remember one time we had this for all leadership. We had Leadership with a Heart program. And that we'd bring everybody in, small groups, a lot smaller than this, and we talked about what it meant to have leadership with a heart. And one time a question came up, and we were talking about this exact question. And the question, somebody asked, well, how can we expect everybody to care? And I said back, how can we not? So we expected everybody to care. And when you expect it, they do.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but from listening to you and talking to you over the years, one of the things that they did is that they were really intentional about what is that language that was trying to describe the temperature that they were trying to set.
Yeah.
And then they were proactive about, we're going to go out to all those places and we're going to have what I would refer to as conversations that are the currency for change. We're going to have, the expectation is we have to do it this way. And it doesn't mean we're going to be perfect, right?
Right.
Because they weren't. But they were really thoughtful about catching people doing it well. And so all of a sudden the bar was raised throughout everything they did that this was the level of expectation. And anytime the question was, well, we can't expect people to do that, the answer back was, yes, we can.
And you know what was so amazing? It transferred throughout all those cultures. It was amazing. People said it won't work. And we weren't trying to export America. That's not what we were trying to do. We were trying to take a value system were human values. Look, everybody wants to love and be loved. Everybody wants to be treated with respect and dignity. Everybody wants to grow as a human being. Those things were universal. It didn't make any difference whether they were in Kuwait City, whether they were in Tokyo, whether they were in Cairo, whether they were in London, whether they were in New York, whether they were in Los Angeles, or whether they were in Columbus. Those things were universal. And we took those. It was part of who we were. And it's what we talked about. We used to have what we called open forums. And we would invite everybody, baristas to come, and we'd pay them on their time off to come. And we would just have an open forum. We'd have presentation, and then we'd open it up to the floor. What questions do you have? And it didn't make any difference what you asked. It was okay. It was safe. Not always. We'd run into times when leaders, we'd get a leader in that it wasn't safe with, but we'd fix that. But, I remember one time in Seattle, this was, not early on, about middle stage when I was there, and we had a graphic designer, Daryl, I can't remember his last name, young African-American guy, and here was sitting up at the front, all white people in these bar stools. And he got up and he said, when can I expect someone that looks like me to be sitting in one of those bar stools? His exact question. The room went dead silent. It just, like, you could have heard a pin drop. And both Howard and I, stood up to take the question, and Howard took it. He said, Daryl, I've never thought about that, but now I am. And that started us on Daryl, because of his question, started us on a whole other journey. And a guy named Bob Latimer, who came in to work with us. He's a professor in North Carolina something now, and that's what he worked in diversity. It changed the whole company, and it added another guiding principle in the list of guiding principles. And from that point on, we started to inch our way towards diversity. And until one time, half the people in those bar stools were female, and 20% were of a different color. If you look at the board of Starbucks, that's what you see today. And we'd never asked that question. We were just trying to grow, do what we were trying to do. It just wasn't something we had thought about, and it was, it was in the early 90s, so, the discussion was kind of different at that point in time. But we honored those things, and that's how we changed. And that made a difference. But you had to honor the questions. Right? And it had to be okay. And it was. I didn't care what they asked me. They could ask me anything. Are you wearing a hairpiece? I said, no, this is my real hair. How much do you earn? All sorts of things, yeah.
Oh, Becky back here, and then I think David's got one too.
Everything sounds great. How do you face resistance, though, on any level, whether it's at the high level or down to the person sweeping the floor? Because every organization, if we started from a clean slate, we could all buy into it. But what do you do when you're already up and running and you're trying to create that change and you face resistance?
Well, there's always resistance. I have this theory about that there are 20% of the people, if they caught Howard Schultz having an affair with his administrative assistant, taking cash out of the cash register and putting it in his pocket, they would say, oh, Howard would, and it'd be on 60 Minutes, full video, and they'd say Howard would never do that. Kind of reminds you of our country right now, doesn't it? And then there's 20% of the people that no matter what Howard did, put all their kids through Harvard, but there's something Howard's doing it for an ulterior motive. And then there's the 60% of the people that move within the organization. So you have resistance in both areas, don't you? Resistance, that's part of it. See, the people that scare me the most are not the people that say, well, what's Howard's ulterior motive? It's the people that never see anything wrong. They're the ones that get you in most trouble the fastest, because they're the true believers. They think everything is perfect, and they never question anything. So, look, you have to have patience, number one. People don't come along at the same speed that you want them to come along at. But you got to stay with it. You can never give up. Some things just are who you are, and if you can't be part of that, then Starbucks is not a place for you. When you're going through really systemic change, like you're really trying to, like a leader comes into an organization, and this happens both sides of the ball, right? A new leader comes in as an autocratic leader and wants everybody to say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, right? what happens to people that can't do that? They leave, don't they? They can't, and that leader says, well, they just don't get it. They can't be part of this organ. And it's on the opposite side of it too. When you're trying to change a culture to have an inclusive culture where everybody respects other people, it just takes time. But that's who we are. And people that eventually can't live by that, they don't belong there. And you have to say, thank you for working here. We still love you. How can we help you? Because you got to love the people going out the door as much as you loved them coming in the door, no matter who they're, because they're still human beings. They just don't fit your organization. But that has to be the way it is. And at Starbucks, treating each other with respect and dignity is the first guiding principle. And if you're to say which one matters, that's the only one that really matters.
So one of the ways that I think they did what they did, Becky, to ask your question, is I used the example of what they were trying to do from a customer experience standpoint, is they were trying to get you to participate in the creation of your own cup of coffee. The same thing they did, but when he talks about doing the forums and bringing their people in, is that they were asking those questions of, well, if there's resistance in something they're trying to do culturally, well, what is it that you want? Meaning not just you from the leadership perspective, but to your people. Well, what is it? I do this with a lot of the companies and organizations. I'm looking right at you, Scott. I mean, we're doing this throughout your entire company right now of asking that question, well, what is the culture that you desire? From whether you're the person that sweeps the floor till you're the CEO, well, what is it that you want? And let's name that. And then in the midst of, there's no magic pill or flip of the switch that then happens, but then intentionally of saying, okay, what are we going to now do from a leadership perspective individually and throughout our entire organization that's going to hold us accountable to moving from here to where you say you want to go? Okay, what are we going to now go do in order to create that?
Everything matters. Everything we did to support that. I used to send out birthday and anniversary cards to every person that worked in the company till we had about 100,000 people. That's the truth. I'd have 10,000 cards that I had to write, and I would take them on airplanes, boxes, and then I'd put them in envelopes and send them back to my administrative assistant. And then finally we spread it out to different people. But those little things mattered. We tried to catch people doing the right things right. And we had a little booklet called the Green Apron book. And in the Green Apron book was everything that mattered to us in terms of human values. And then we'd have these little cards that anybody could give to anybody at any time because it supported some value in the Green Apron book. And those things go on today. I was in Turkey. This was about a year ago. And I walked into a store and I was having conversations with people and it was a great experience, and I've been retired for a long time. And before I left, somebody came up to me and handed me one of these little cards, thanking me for being one of the cards says, be genuine, for being genuine. And those things are alive and well, and they keep going, and all that stuff kind of mattered over time. But look, what happens in organizations is like attracts like. Eventually, people that don't fit, that don't share the values, don't stay because they're uncomfortable. It's not where they want to be. And they leave. And, Jim Collins says it's like the virus, they get ejected like a virus. And that's what happens. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it was easy. It was not. It was hard. And it was something that was always off. And that, like I said, the people were my day job. And that's what I focused on, was that stuff, because that was going to be the ultimate success or failure of Starbucks. It's what I truly believed. I believe it to this day. I will always believe it. Nothing will ever take my mind. I don't care what happens. Yeah, look, there's only one reason that you all exist. One reason and one reason only. I don't care what your job is. I don't care what your title is. I don't care what it says on your card. I don't care what kind of office you have. I don't care how much money you make or how much money you don't make. There's only one reason anybody in this room is here. That's to serve another human being. And that's all there will ever be. If you think that's not true, think again. And that's what we need to focus on. And that's what we tried to focus on at Starbucks. It wasn't shoving a cup of coffee across the counter. It was serving another human being in a way that other human beings want to be served. And we drove that and drove that and drove that in. And it wasn't through fancy sayings. It was rewarding that behavior all the time.
I think we got a couple more questions. Yeah.
I think that you answered this anecdotally already, but it seems like your core constituency, when you say make it about the people, when you lost that North Star, was that about your partners at Starbucks? Is that your guiding light, or is that about the experience of the human being that's going to buy that cup of coffee? Or was it like if you build it, if we can make the people that will be there to greet them happy, the human beings will be happy, or was it vice versa?
No, it's about the people that you work with first and foremost. That's what it has to be. It's, look, they can't be any different than how you treat them. You know, whenever you see these service training programs, I don't like the word training because I think you train pets. You educate and develop human beings. And look, it was about treating people well, and we expected that to be part of it because we wanted that to happen. We didn't want them to be robots. That wasn't, would you like a large with that today? You know, every once in a while I'd catch people saying, would you like some food? I even catch in stores today. And I say, please don't ask me that question. I come in here 18 times a month. I know if I want food or not. It's treating them as human beings and encourage them to be human beings back. So I want to close with a story. So we had a customer, a human being that lived in a nursing home across the street from one of our stores in Santa Monica. We're close by where you live. And every day, his name was Jim, and they called him Big Jim because he was about 6'6", huge, right? He was an ex-football player, and he'd come in every day about 2 o'clock, and he'd order a blueberry muffin and a short drip. That's all he could afford was a short drip. He wouldn't buy anything like you, cheap. Okay. Yeah.
Whoa.
Okay. So he would order that, and he would get that, and he would sit down and have his coffee, and he would talk to the baristas, and they would joke and with them, and they would have fun and have conversations about life and about all sorts of things. And on every bag or a cup, the baristas would always write something, right? Either to jab him or to say, Jim, we love you, or Jim, he was a Steelers fan, the Steelers suck. And anything to create dialogue and conversation, make him laugh or make him feel welcome. And that was the relationship they had. He was kind of their grandfatherly kind of guy and a friend, and he was their grandkids. And so he loved to have fun, and they had fun together. And they loved each other. I mean, really loved each other. And that went on for about 2 years, and one day, 2 o'clock comes, 3 o'clock comes, 4 o'clock comes, no Jim. So one of the baristas grabbed a cup of coffee and a blueberry muffin and says, I'm going across the street to take coffee to Jim. Maybe he's not feeling well. So walked into the front door of the nursing home and went up to the reception and said, where's Jim at? I've got a coffee and a blueberry muffin. And she said, I'm sorry to tell you, but Jim passed away in his sleep last night. So the barista went back to the store and of course, told everybody, and everybody was sad. And, how you lose a friend, a good friend. And so 2 days later, or a day later, one of the children of Jim came into the store and went to the store manager and said, Jim loved all you guys. And, tomorrow is going to be his funeral, and I know he would really appreciate it if the store could come. And I know it's an impossible task to ask, but is it possible? And the store manager said, we will be there. We will all be there. And so he got replacements for everybody, including himself, and they showed up at the funeral home. And as they walked through the doors of the funeral home, here were 3 big round tables. Those tables that we all sit at with 10 people sit around when we're having one of those luncheons. And all the tables were filled with, what do you think? All the bags and all the cups with every saying that they had written to Jim on them. You see, in life, it's the little things that matter. It isn't the big things. It's the little things that we do to say, I love you. It's walking down the hallway in your companies, your organization. Don't let people walk down the hallway with their heads down, without you saying something. Hey, how you doing? How's your day? Even if you don't know them. When you get on the elevator, bring the energy of the elevator up. You know, even in the hotel, talk to the people, Help people have a better day. That's what we need to do in our lives. And that's what they did for each other. Who would have ever thought that those little sayings on those cups would have meant so much to another human being that he saved every one of them? So that's what matters in our lives. That's what makes organizations go and what makes them grow. And that's what we're here to do. Help people have a better life. So that's it, folks. That's all there is.
Howard's with us all day, so I'm going to encourage you to ask him other questions. And the guy's amazing, and has been, as I said earlier, just an amazing person to me and support of me. And so I'm really glad that he's able to be here with us.
So let me return it. Let me tell you about this guy. So you all know him. He's got a lot of buddies here, you know, and so you know who he is. And so we were both at a Greenleaf Servant Leadership Conference, and I was speaking, and he was there speaking, and he was there outside. There were books, you know, and he was there at a table, and nobody was out there at that time. And I have what's called if you have to be Jewish to understand it, shpilkas, right? Shpilkas are ants in your pants, and I'm always walking around, you know, ADD, you know, and. So I'm walking by, and here he is, and he's talking, here are his books, and I says, what's that? And so I sat down, and we started having this conversation. And the further we got in the conversation, I realized, man, did I relate to this guy? You know, that was step back from the baggage claim. I said, I get that. It's so true, right? In life, we need to step back from the baggage claim. And that began a relationship that we started 9 years ago. And, you know, every month or two, we get on a call and we just talk. Now, there's nothing what can I do for him? You know, I can give him encouragement once in a while or something, but he's a smart guy. But you know what he does for me? He makes me feel like a whole human being, like I'm valued, like I'm not, that life hasn't passed. I'm 73, but I still have something to contribute. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate your caring. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast platform or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of this conversation. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or this kind of development would add value to your team or organization, we hope you'll contact us at www.jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.